Okay, it should be starting. Hi, and welcome to Barry Aftercare, the podcast. And I am joined tonight by another podcaster who is also in the bariatric community. But I just found out something that you're going to find out in a few minutes about her podcast about whether or not you should listen to it. And the answer is yes. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce you to Shea Quinn. Hi, Shea.
Hi, Connie. Thanks for having me on today.
You're welcome. I had the privilege of being on your podcast called Growing
Yes.
with Shay not too long ago, and I just fell in love with you and thought,
Oh,
I need my audience to know you.
yes. Well, the feeling's mutual.
Thanks. And you know what? The reason I said that at the beginning is because here's what I didn't know until we were talking before the podcast started. Your podcast is not bariatric specific. So tell me about that.
Correct. Yeah. I, when I got into sharing my story more publicly, there was a point where I had to make a decision, or I felt like I had to make a decision of, do I want to be focused on bariatrics? Do I want to be focused on the community? I've struggled with hormonal issues and infertility. Do I want to be focused in on that? And I've always been the type of person that I have a lot of facets about me, and I think that's true for any human being, but it felt very stifling to think, oh man, I only can talk about bariatric surgery or I can only talk about fertility struggles. And that's why I created my platforms to be more just about me and what I'm going through and just sharing that and relating to that. And so you'll find a lot of bariatric crossovers because I have a lot of friends in the community who've been on my podcast and who have those similar experiences. But yes, it's Grow with Shay, and that's open to anybody because we're all growing, or hopefully we're all growing and learning, and that's where I've gotten so much value, is just from learning from other people who maybe don't have the same experiences as me. That's where I've learned the most. So
It's so true. And I love that you have the bariatric journey as part of your podcast, but there's so much more. And honestly, I think that it's critical for even people in the bariatric community after that first or second year when you're so honed in on trying to get the lifestyle down, right? To expand and learn in other areas because the surgery itself is not going to keep the weight off. You have to talk about grief and you have to talk about sadness and joy and the good things in life and how those can kind of offset and help you in the other areas. So I love that your
yeah.
podcast is more generalized. So
Yeah, well, oh, I was just going to say it's true. And I think it's easy to, especially in the beginning stages. I'm just almost 18 months post bariatric surgery. And especially in the beginning stages, it's easy to forget that you're more than bariatric surgery, right? Because it's such a huge part of your life. And so, like, I've definitely been in that season of, I was thinking about bariatric surgery and my new stomach and all of these things, especially earlier on, where that was all consuming. But it for me, and I've talked with other people in the community too, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I'm more than just a bariatric patient, though. I have lots of other things. And that's why I personally chose to get the surgery, is so I could learn who I was created to be, so I could experience things outside of just bariatric surgery. So that's what I always say, like, bariatric surgery was the catalyst to all of that. And it was a huge experience. But that's not who Shay is. That's just a part of my journey. And so I think that's really important to remember. Bariatric surgery isn't my identity, but it is something that has gotten me closer into discovering that.
you used a phrase that just really set well with me, and it was discovering or learning who I was created to be.
Mhm.
So, with that statement, I'd like you to talk about that, but also prior to having surgery, do you feel like you were stifled from becoming who you were created to be?
I think I didn't see who I was. I think how I view it is, I have always been who I was created to be. I just think that prior to surgery, I didn't see that for a lot of different reasons. I had a lot of different things that prevented me from seeing my worth and seeing who I really was. And so I had done a lot of work in trying to, work through childhood trauma and learn more about myself prior to having surgery. But something about having surgery just made that process like go get really fast and really deep, really quick. And so I'm always really careful about like it's not that after I had surgery I became worthy. I don't see it that way at all. It's just that having surgery helped me see it for the first time. So there's elements now in learning like who I was created to be and actually feeling safe enough to express it that are very similar to like how I was when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, where I'm like, oh, there she is again. Like I
Oh,
there's a lot of pieces that I feel like I've always been that, but just for a while it kind of was hidden and I didn't know it.
so rediscovering some authenticity.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
it's funny because I've talked with several people in the community who've said like, "Oh man, I feel like a new person after surgery," or "I feel like a completely new person." And for me, in my experience, it hasn't been that way. It's actually felt more like a homecoming. Like, oh, this feels so nice. This is who I've always been. I just
Yeah.
kind of lost her for a little bit, or I didn't see her for a bit.
Well, you mentioned childhood trauma and working through some of that, and my theory is, and having worked as a therapist for 30 years and going through this myself, although my journey to my authentic self was going through a treatment program for alcohol and drugs. And I think we're born who we're supposed to be.
Yes.
And then life happens to us. And I always liken it to like a water bottle, and we're born kind of full. And
Hmm.
then, childhood traumas, whether it be, consistently being criticized or, physical abuse or sexual abuse or emotional abuse or constantly being compared to a sibling or whatever it is, or picking on you at the playground, it pours out some of that good stuff. And we're
Hmm.
left with a void of shame that fills with shame. And
Yes.
as we do things, therapy, improving our health, doing
Hmm.
things that are positive for ourself, body, mind, and spirit, we come back to that authentic self. So I agree, and I believe completely, and I'm sure you think similarly based on what you just said, that the experiences that I went to get me to the treatment process, to get
Hmm.
me into treatment where I could start peeling away and working through all that shame and filling back up with more positive self-talk and self-esteem and self-worth and seeing the worth that I was born with. It
Hmm.
did get me to a place to where I believe I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I
Yeah.
you know?
100%. And it's funny because I just made a post on Instagram today talking about just for myself, I'm declaring myself in maintenance mode now. And that's been kind of like an interesting
Love it.
thing to come around to because it is one of those things where it's not like, or at least for me, it's not like I've had somebody to say, yep, you're in maintenance mode or like your stability. It's really just been no, like I feel like this feels really good to my body and where I'm meant to be. And um relating back, oh, sorry, this is where my ADD brain, I had a thought. Let me get to it. You were talking about the water bottle, childhood trauma, um,
Shame.
shame. Um, Oh, I don't know what I was going to say, but in regards to more of that maintenance mode, it's been an interesting process of kind of piecing that together and going, I've tried to lose weight my whole life and now I'm kind of at where I want to be. And that's a new and uncomfortable and different space. And so I think relating back to what we were saying before, lots of newness in this journey. And even with the stability and familiarity, that in itself feels new and different. And that's been surprising, I guess.
Yep, yep, yep. So you mentioned that the process of working through some of that was kind of fast forward and a deep dive after surgery. Do you think that was related to the purpose that food served for you? Like it kept you from experiencing some of these emotions and then when you didn't have it to turn to?
A little bit. How I kind of see it is I didn't have capacity to really dig deep because I was so focused not only on food, but for me, it was like that constant strive for losing weight. And kind of how my journey started with looking into bariatric surgery was trying to get pregnant. So my husband and I were trying to get pregnant for 3 years. It just wasn't happening. And so there was this constant striving towards, okay, what can I do to get pregnant? What can I do to get my body to be healthier? And so that consumed so much of like my time, my energy, my thoughts, that when that element was removed, because for one, research and doctors will say that it's best to wait to try to conceive for at least 12 to 18 months after
Yeah,
surgery. So it's like that was off the table, where it's like, okay, no thought of trying to get pregnant. And then
right,
the other thought of like, okay, how do I get healthier? How do I lose weight? That was removed too, because it was naturally happening for the first time in my life.
right.
Where,
Mhm.
it was hard work and like mentally a lot of work, but physically my metabolism was functioning because I had a reset, that metabolism reset from my surgery, to where I didn't have to think about the next diet or think about the next thing. It's like I could really just focus on, what is my body telling me? What am I feeling? Why, do I want to be in relationships with these people who have been in my life for so long? Why does that not feel good? And so it just kind of forced me, I think, to be more present and allowed for more capacity to sort through those things that before I kind of was able to ignore because I was focused on,
Sure.
fad diets or getting enough exercise in, being self-punishing, things like that.
Right, right. Boy, and that infertility bus is a tough one. It's interesting that that was kind of my other pull professionally, and I did some work when I was in that area, and I have a really if I could have co-occurring careers, that would probably be the other area because it's just heartbreaking, the time, the energy, the money, the physical, all of
Mhm.
that. So that's another thing that I'm sure you're talking about on your podcast, that was part of your growing experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because that was really without those infertility struggles, I don't know that I would have ever gotten bariatric surgery, or it would have been maybe later in life, because that really was my driving motivation, was like, I need to lose weight so I can have kids. It wasn't even about feeling healthy or like getting skinny or whatever. I think elements were maybe intertwined with that, but really, like, if I had gotten pregnant right when I wanted to,
Yeah,
I wouldn't have had surgery, because it's like, okay, I got what I wanted in that sense. And so
right.
I'm thankful, even though it's been super heartbreaking and there's been so much grief there and pain. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody because it is really hard. It is interesting how that's played out, where it's like, just to kind of go back and think about, man, if I hadn't struggled with fertility, I wouldn't have had bariatric surgery. I probably wouldn't be sharing my story in this sense. I wouldn't have met so many people in the community. It's just interesting how all that works. And so I'm always very careful, because I hate when people like silver line things. And so I'm always really careful to not say, oh, everything happens for a reason. And I'm so thankful I went through that because it's led to this. And there's elements that I feel like I'm holding on to more that feel true to me, but it's also been really hard too at the same time. And both of those things can exist at the same time.
That's right. It's both and. Absolutely.
Yes.
Not either or. You mentioned that well, let me back up a step. So you started this so you could get pregnant. What
Mhm.
is it about for you at this point?
It's turned into something so much more. And you've learned this with me, Connie. I'm a crier. I never was before. I always held it in, but now once they start, I can't stop it. But um really, it's now become like being who I was created to be. And valuing myself for just being who I am. And what I mean by that is, even if I don't ever get pregnant, that was my initial goal,
Sure.
I'm still a worthy person. And if all of that has led to me feeling how I feel about that now and the peace that comes with that, man, it was so worth it. It was really hard, but it's been so worth it. So I think for now, what it's about is really being present and honoring myself, and really being able to share that with people, to know that there's hope, because for a long time I just didn't feel like there was a lot of hope.
Right.
Um, whether that was in terms of fertility, or um, being a woman or a wife, or whatever you want to apply it to, there were just seasons that felt really hopeless. And what helped me a lot was seeing people who had been in similar situations that I was facing, and seeing what they did to overcome that or work through it. And that's why I really share openly and honestly, because that's what was so helpful for me. And so a lot of the content that I do, whether it's on Instagram, YouTube, my podcast, a lot of it is me talking to myself in different phases.
I love that.
Yeah. So hopefully, if there's another person in a similar phase that I was in, it resonates, and it might be helpful just to have that connection so people know that they're not alone. And so I think that's kind of what it's turned into. And then all of the other things that I know have already happened since that time and that are yet to come, those I feel like are just like, that's just gravy at that point. Like, I don't know. It's just interesting having that mindset shift. It's been cool.
For many years, when I would speak to a group of bariatric patients, I would tell them, if I could give you one gift right here, right now, that you could take with you, it would be quit beating up on yourself emotionally.
Yes.
Get rid of that negative self talk. But you know what? I think I'm going to change that, or incorporate along with that, is the gift. If we could somehow give people the gift of knowing that they have worth,
Yes.
wonderful worth, regardless of anything, that each human being just has inherent worth.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's what I talk about. That's the word that has resonated the most with me. But I tell people, you can fill in the blank. A lot of times we're saying the same things, just using different language for it. But that worth component, that's been the biggest thing that I've learned in this process, just that inherent worth, and how I got worth, or I tried to seek out validation for my worth in so many different ways that for a while worked, in the sense of getting validation from people and feeling good about that. But then it got to a point, especially after surgery, where I'm like, why are these validations not feeling good anymore? Why are these not enough anymore? And a lot of that is because I wasn't getting it from a source that um, it was coming from a source that could run out, and did run out, and disappointed often. And so, yeah, worth is a huge thing. That's a topic I love talking about.
Absolutely. And, back to my water bottle.
Yes, I
So
love that
sometimes
analogy.
our worth is spilled out, and then we have these holes, right? And people can dump good stuff into us and give us all the compliments in the world, and,
Mhm.
tell us how wonderful we are. But there's holes, man, and we have to plug the holes ourselves.
Yes.
Nobody can do it for us. There's nothing wrong with needing external validation or affirmation. That's all good stuff. But if it's all draining out the bottom, it's not going to be useful if we don't
Yeah.
believe it ourselves. So that is something I think that is transformative, truly
Mhm.
transformative in a person's life, is realizing I do have worth, regardless of my size, regardless of my shape, regardless of my ability to, you know, excel in a career or have a baby or whatever it is.
Mhm.
I have worth.
Yeah, and that's honestly the only thing that has allowed me to do this work of doing content, podcasts, videos, all of that, because there was a season in my life where if I had done that, like, and I've gotten, some negative comments and stuff, and like those would have just like made me quit everything. If I had tried to do this, back before surgery or before that, because I had so much of my worth tied up in how other people viewed me and what they said about me. There's no way I could be doing what I'm doing now. And so it's like, do those things sting still? Of course. Like, are they painful? Yes. When I feel like misunderstood, or someone says something that doesn't feel, inherently true, or whatever the case is, or it's just plain hurtful. Yeah, that still hurts. And my worth isn't dependent on that. So it's like the process of that usually looks like, oh man, that was painful and sad. And I don't like that I was seen that way. And I know that's not true. And so I always ask people, like, is it worth the risk? So for me, it is worth that risk now. But
Yeah.
at another time, it wasn't worth the risk, and that's okay. So I ask myself that a lot. Like, okay, is sharing this story or this photo, is it worth the risk of people judging me or saying cruel things or whatever? And sometimes it's yes, and sometimes it's no. But a lot of it has been yes. And time again, it's like, if that helps one person or that resonates with one person, like, I could have been that one person, like, and I would have been so appreciative of that. And so I ask myself that a lot. Is it worth the risk? And sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no.
And I think what we're talking about right now is almost a universal experience, unfortunately,
Yeah.
in that whatever happened in our lives has left us feeling inadequate or less than or unworthy or whatever term you want to use. But hearing your story, and mine is very similar. It wasn't until I went through treatment and started to do the inner work and look at myself and all those things that I think anybody watching or listening is going to be able to relate to. I struggle with my worth. But
Hmm.
listening to you and seeing me and so many other people working to improve our worth and having the courage to do that deep work. I mean, it just didn't happen overnight, right? You talked about being in lots of therapy. Is that what I'm?
Oh yeah, lots of therapy, lots of talking with other people, lots of sitting in uncomfortable feelings and thoughts. Like, it's been an isolating process too. Like, I think that's something that I wasn't expecting in the way, but like in a good way. Like, it's been helpful, but it has been like really isolating, because I say this often, but it's like, it sucks because it has to start with you. Like, you have to be the one to do the work, and it's not everybody else around you. It's like, you have to be the one to do it. And that is isolating because only you can do it.
It is. And I remember sitting in a therapy session one time, and it was at my one of my lowest points in terms of depression and anxiety and just feeling complete despair and knowing I couldn't continue on how I was, but
Hmm.
knowing I didn't want to die either, and not knowing what to do, and just this depth of awareness that nobody can do this for me.
Mm.
Nobody can do this for me. I have to do whatever it is I have to do to work through this. People can help me, but nobody can do it for me. And that was terrifying, but also very empowering,
Yes.
right? Because it's like, okay, what are you gonna do then? What are you
Hmm.
gonna do? You gonna I had kids, I had a husband, I was like, "What are you gonna do? You gonna
Hmm.
quit? You gonna just cave in on yourself and do nothing, or are you gonna work it out with the help of other people?" And
Hmm.
that's scary.
It is. And that's been like this, a lot of things in this journey. It's like, it's been very scary initially, and then empowering is such a great word, I think. And then it's like, once I get past that fear and that scariness of that unfamiliarity and uncomfortability, then it gets to more of that, ooh, but this is exciting because I have direct control over
Yes.
certain aspects of things, right? I can choose the people that I have around me. I can choose the words that I say or what I take or watch or whatever. I have a lot of choices. And before, I had more of a victim mentality, and more of like, I felt like I didn't have any choices. And so it's it's hard because then it's like when you recognize you have choices, there can be a lot of shame and embarrassment of like, oh man, I guess I do have choices and I've been making not so great choices for me. But it's like, shame is like there. I'm well acquainted with shame, and she has no place with me anymore. And it's going, no, I'm going to choose to make a different choice now, and I have the power and control to do that. How cool is that?
That is very, very cool. You mentioned that you questioned about the people you hung out with.
Hmm.
So, what was that in relation to, and how did you resolve that for yourself?
Yeah, it was really hard because I was rapidly changing like in every possible way after surgery, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially. I was a different person. And to me, it felt like a homecoming, like I mentioned, like, oh my gosh, I'm finally back to myself and who I've always been.
Right,
And it was interesting though that with people around me, it was a completely different person to them. Maybe it was somebody that they once knew a long time ago, depending on how long I knew those people.
mhm,
Or maybe it was someone that they had just been meeting for the first time. And so that was an interesting connection to make of, oh, like this is who I've always been and this feels familiar to me, but to other people around me, I'm completely different.
right,
And so, again, it comes back to that worth piece of I started seeing my worth for the first time, which meant that it became more clear when I felt violated by things. That's the word that I like to use because that's always felt like a very intense word, but I
mhm,
feel like it's a very accurate word. And so what started to happen with certain relationships in my life is things that people would say that before maybe wouldn't bother me, or it would bother me but I didn't want to say anything about it because I didn't think I was worth saying anything about it. I started to have a lot more rubs, if you will, right? So it's like, ooh, that person said that and that's not okay. I'm worth more than that. And so what I've found is the trend of that has been the people who are secure with themselves and are wanting to do the same type of work, those relationships have gotten a lot deeper and a lot stronger. And so I've gotten a lot closer to certain people. And then there's other people who maybe aren't in that stage of their life of wanting to be honest with themselves or honest with other people. And those relationships have naturally kind of fizzled or are taking a vacation. I don't know. That's what I like to hope is maybe they're just on break for a little bit.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's just interesting because having surgery, I feel like it just kind of enhanced what was already there. But it came down to seeing my worth for the first time and learning how to interact with people with that new perspective. And like I said, some relationships, it's been awesome, even though it's been really hard and messy, it's been awesome outcomes, and other relationships, not so much.
You know that business of being honest with self,
Hmm.
that changes too, right? Because there
Yes.
were times in my life when I was being honest at that time, and looking back on it, it's like, "Oh, Lord, was I hoodwinking myself?" You know? It was like
Mhm.
I was buying my own BS because it was protective,
Right.
and I needed to, and so that that how do we ever know if we're really being honest with ourselves, right? We're being honest at the moment, and that's
Yes.
pretty much all we can ask because, you talk to people after surgery and before surgery, kinda like you were saying, maybe before you would have said, "Well, I'll let them say that," and it's not because I don't have worth that I allow that, it's because I don't wanna hurt their feelings if I say so,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then as your worth does increase, you're like, "Oh, hell no,"
Right.
right?
Well, a lot of times how I categorize it, and again, this is something I say often, it's one thing to know something, it's another to experience it. And so I think before having surgery, like if you would have asked me, do you have worth? I would have said, yeah, like I have worth. Like it was something that I've known. It's just after surgery, this has been the first time I've experienced it. And so I think that's kind of
Yeah.
how I see it, where,
I
like you
love
said, I was being honest the whole time, like in the best way that I could be, but was I experiencing what it felt like to
Mhm.
be worthy? Not by what I was doing and the choices and how I talked to myself. Like I can say like, no, I don't feel like I fully experienced what it felt like to be worthy until more recently. Or and maybe more when I was a kiddo too. Like kind of that's a lot of what I relate back to. Like I think I was experiencing my worth like maybe when I was like 3, 4, 5, 6, but then at that point in the middle between 6 years old and 28 years old, there was a lot of not experiencing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Due to external factors, right? That we
Yes.
internalize.
Hmm.
It's interesting because you were able to intellectually know that you had worth, but you weren't experiencing that worth. And I love that. And I just want to kind of play this out with you, just sort of
Hmm.
figuring this out. So, a lot of times, I think that if we're acting from a place of worth,
Hmm.
that's when we say, "You're not gonna treat me this way."
Hmm.
That's when we say, "I'm not gonna put that unhealthy thing in my body." That's
Hmm.
when we say, "I don't have to like exercise, but I'm gonna do it because I am worth having the best life possible."
Hmm.
So I think as we get in touch with as our worth either resurfaces or we
Hmm.
get more in touch with it, then we act out of that. When we're in that place where the world has hurt us and we're protective, we don't act out of that worth
Right.
and we do self-destructive things.
Yeah. Well, a perfect example of that is so when I'm talking about like exercise, I use the word movement because that doesn't have or that has more of a neutral connotation to me. Exercise, working out has more of a self-punishing like diet culture mentality. Not saying that's how people mean it when they say it. That's just how I hear it and
For
perceive it.
sure. For
But
sure.
so for movement, I've been very purposeful in my journey because movement was always more of a self-punishing thing. Like, I ate a cookie today, so I'm going to go work out because, I was bad. I don't say, or I rarely say stuff like that about myself now, but that's kind of
Right.
how I used to see it. And more recently, I just have felt like my body has just been wanting to move more. Whereas before, after surgery, I just was not pushing myself in that area. I was like, you know what? I'm going to know when it's time to move my body more. And I'm not going to be regimented of like going to the gym every, 3 times a week or whatever. Totally cool if that works for people. I just knew and intuitively that did not feel right for me. And it's been more in this last month where it's like something within my body is like, I just want to move. And it's now coming from the place of like, wow, body, you're wanting to move now, and I'm worth that. I get to go move and get some energy out, and that feels really good. And so that's just one way of approaching it from a different way of like, no, I'm not like, oh, I ate today or I ate this, that, and the other. So I'm going to go work out at the gym to punish myself for that. It's like, no, like how cool my body is wanting to move more. This is a new experience for me because doing some of the things that I'm doing now before would have been exhausting and not nourishing for me, but today it is, and so that's been a cool experience.
Absolutely. And I think that for people who are new in this journey, it's so important to hear things like that and hear things, the words you say, like, it's intuitive to me. I need to trust my body. I need to listen to what my body's telling me. And I love the mindset. It's a whole different ball game when you say, I have to punish myself and exercise. Like
Yes.
that's just a big old downer versus how glorious that my body can move.
Yeah.
How amazing that my body can move. And I feel similarly like I am not an athlete of any degree. I happen to love yoga. And
Yes.
so a yoga teacher said to me, well, you should try Pilates. And I said, I'm not interested in Pilates. It feels like exercise.
Uh-huh.
Yoga feels like dance to me. And I
Mhm.
always wanted to be a dancer when I was a child. And so it just feels like movement and just joy. I
Mhm.
call it my beloved yoga because I truly love that movement.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like exercise. It feels like this is my time to pretend I'm a dancer.
Yeah. Well, and that's something, like, I just didn't I thought, like, that all movement of any kind, like, I'm like, "Oh, people don't actually enjoy this. They're just, like, faking it to, like, look better, and there's no way that they enjoy it," because I was always doing it for more of that self-punishing of, like, "I have to
Mm.
run cardio or I have to do this or that," but genuinely, I enjoy movement now, and so just, again, for people who are maybe newer in this space, it's not when it's not coming from a self-punishing place, like, my body does crave movement more. It's amazing how that works.
And what a gift to quit punishing yourself.
Yes.
Gosh, what a sadness to me, that
Mhm,
and it's not like I've not been there. And
mhm.
sometimes I go there, right? But
Yeah,
it doesn't last nearly as long, and I have the tools now to get out of that.
yeah. I think that's what I was going, like, way back when in the beginning of the conversation, going into maintenance mode and that self-punishing kind of attitude. It's like I do practice and try to practice that self compassion, but that's been interesting to see those self punishing thoughts and, like, more of like, oh, I need to be doing more. If I'm not losing weight, then I'm not worthy. Like those, even though I try to practice self compassion, those things still linger, right? Those patterns and the things that I've been taught or that I've practiced before, like I have to remind myself often, like, it's only been 18 months since having this life changing surgery. And
Right.
like patterns, from 27 years prior are going to be, the residuals are still going to be there. And so try to remind myself of that often and have really cool people around me that remind me of that.
Yeah. I went through treatment like 35 years ago, and so for the past 35 years, I've been working on improvement, right? Not perfection, but I'll tell you some of the things like body image and, those kinds of things will still bite me in the rear sometimes.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not about these things going away, or I'll have an automatic negative thought. So I don't know that some of the things that are so ingrained ever go away, but it's about, like you said, having the skills and the people around to help you move through those more quickly and say, I'm not wasting my time with that. I'm
Mhm,
giving no energy to that. It
mhm,
has no benefit to my life today. And
mhm.
sometimes I need to call my best friend and say, listen, I have a hiccup on this negative thought. Can you help me?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and honestly, that's where I've used content a lot too, where it's like it's been very therapeutic for me in a lot of ways of like I don't share my like deepest, darkest secrets. Like that doesn't feel super safe to me, at least in that space. But I share stuff like that because it feels good to just get it out because that's the one thing I've learned with shame, especially, is that shame doesn't like to be called out. And the second you call it out, it becomes a lot smaller. And
Sure
so
does.
it's like saying that thought out loud to a safe person, or even just writing it down, saying it out loud to yourself. It loses its power pretty quick because it's like, okay, yeah, I've thought that, or that's there, and here it is now. And one thing I ask myself a lot is that a lie or is that truth?
Exactly.
And if it's a lie, it's like, okay, that's okay that I had that lie or that thought come up. But what is the truth? The truth is this. And so that's a practice that I use a lot.
Yes, and it's, questioning the thoughts, right?
Mhm.
Like, as evidenced by what? Right? And talking back to them and saying that like you do, it's like, "That is not the truth, so let me dig deep and find
Mhm.
out what is the truth for me."
Yeah.
So tell me about your go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and using that curiosity on myself is actually really fun. It's fun
Yeah.
approaching myself with curiosity instead of that blaming, self-punishing, "Oh, why are you doing that?" or whatever. It's like, "Oh, interesting. Why did you do that? That's an interesting thing." So that's taken practice too.
A much better skill than bringing out the hammer and going,
Yes.
"What is the matter with you?"
Yes.
For
Definitely.
sure. So we were talking a little bit about your podcast before we started this podcast, and you were talking about. I want you to talk about your podcast, but you were saying you have experiences, you bring on experiences or do things. Tell me what those are.
Yeah. So as far, yes, it's been a wild year full of a lot. And so I have my different platforms. I'm on YouTube. I have my podcast. I'm also part of the Waiting Table podcast with two other bariatric patients who are men. They are amazing. So that is a fully focused bariatric podcast. And we actually do our shows live. So that's a super cool environment to be a part of. But then, in addition to that, I'm starting to actually hold more spaces for retreats and experiences. And so I'm so excited to do that. Part of this journey and what's been so helpful for me is, like I mentioned, having people who have had shared experiences or just who are able to offer connection and support. And so I call it like the process of being remothered or remothering, but it doesn't have to be gendered in that way. But just the thought, our many of us have parents that maybe weren't able to offer the emotional support that we needed. And so I've found a lot of support and connection in other women in that way. And so part of this retreat that we're offering, it's going to be October 2023, the 20th to the 22nd in Southern Oregon. I'm partnering with three other amazing women who have shared a lot of remothering in my life, and we're going to be offering that to other women identifying people in this space. So this one's kind of coming up quick, but we're hoping to do more of these. So it's not like the one and only opportunity, but I think that's really just where my heart is like, I want to be a bridge to connect people from different spaces, to find connection, to have safe environments to talk honestly and kindly. And we need each other. We need support and help. And so there's a couple other projects and things in the works that kind of go along that same vein. And I'm just so excited about that.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I learned in the 12-step community is nobody can do it for you, but you can't do it alone. So we
Right.
need that. We do need that, reparenting or that embrace figuratively or physically from other people in those safe environments. I love that you're doing retreats. I've been doing them for 5 years, and
Yes.
they are so, I mean, there's just no words to describe the freedom that people experience by
Mhm.
just sharing in a place where other people aren't going to criticize or judge or question or, just going to love you.
Yeah. There's
Abs-
power in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a beautiful thing. So I love that you're doing that. When is it again?
So this first one we're doing, it's October 20th to the 22nd of 2023. So just in a couple months here. And
Mm,
it's so beautiful. It's in Southern Oregon. It's on a river. It's this beautiful log cabin. And it's going
oh,
to be more of an intimate experience. We just have about 8 more spots open for actual overnight stay, but then we do have weekend passes available. So if people are local or want to stay somewhere else, there's still quite a bit of availability for
that's
that.
fantastic.
Yeah, so we're gonna have good food. We're gonna have lots of cool workshops. We really wanted to have it be a balance of getting to recharge. You have choice in what you get to do the whole time. So if you just want to read all day and just have a beautiful environment to do that, you can do that. If you want to participate in activities like trauma informed yoga, that's one of the co-hosts is a trauma informed yoga instructor. We'll
Very
have
cool.
that. We'll have some self exploration workshops. So it'll be very customizable to what you want it to be.
Create your own adventure, man.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what we wanted.
What is the title?
So we use the term embody and grow. So one of the co hosts is one of my best friends. We've been friends since we were 5 years old. And this has been a huge, like, we've been on really odd parallel journeys in a lot of ways. And so it started with her and I, and she's kind of that embody piece. I'm that grow piece. And so embody and grow is that what we call these. So.
Amazing. I love it. How can people sign up?
So you can go to my Stan store is the best way. So if you go to stan.store/grow with Shea, all of the information is on there and updates. Like I said, this is going to be one of many to come. So if it's, you're listening to this and you're like, dang it, it's already passed, don't worry. I think we're going to definitely have some more coming. So
So was that stand.store/grow with Shay?
you got it.
SHEA.
You got it. Like the butter.
And your podcast is Grow
Yep.
with Shay. And your
Yep.
other one with the guys is WEIGHTING. Wait,
Exactly. Yep, we have a little play on words. So yeah, they're super cool. They started that podcast more to connect with the men of bariatric surgery because that's a space where, more men are sharing now, but when they started the podcast
yes.
there just wasn't a lot of people talking, men talking in that space. So they started that and then they were like, okay, maybe we should bring a lady on. So that's why they invited me, but we have a lot of fun.
How much fun. And do you just have a topic and then you just kind of roll with it?
Yeah, we have different guests on. That was a question I was going to ask you because we would love to have you on, but we kind of do it more of like a basically we want it to be like people are sitting around a table and we're having a conversation, and so that's why all of the podcasts we do are actually live, so you can tune in
Nice.
on YouTube live and participate in the discussion, ask questions. And so typically when we have guests on, we just get to know their story and we have different topics. Like I said, it's more related to bariatric surgery, so we have a good time. We laugh, we cry, we do all the things.
You be human together.
That's right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So what do you have coming up in you got the retreat. And what
Yes.
is your day job?
Oh my goodness. I know my day job. So I actually work in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for 10 years. That's been my whole career, basically. So I work in healthcare and I do kind of customer service, patient experience related work there, which has been cool to kind of see how these two things can overlap. And so yeah, so eventually my goal is to do content full time. So that's what I'm working towards: retreats full time, content full time. So little by little, I'm working towards that.
Well, you've made quite a dent in a short time, woman. I got to tell you.
Thank you. I know it's something I have to remind myself again, part of that like performance, more mentality. It's like, no, I'm super proud of what I've been able to do in this time and just the people that I've been able to connect with, like even just getting to talk with you. Like what a dream. Like it's surreal feeling, honestly.
It really is. And how fun to just, I mean, we had no agenda, no outline. It's like, let's just talk and be real with each other because our experiences are things that people can relate to for sure. And
Mhm.
hopefully take a piece of this and a piece of that and implement it in their own lives so that they can be their best authentic self, right?
That's right. We're all doing that. We're all doing the best we can and we need each other. And yeah, I love it.
And experience your worth. I love that. I love that message. So
Mm.
you hopefully know, listeners, that you have worth. But when Shay talked about experiencing that worth rather than having the cognitive knowledge of that, different experience because then you act on your own behalf.
Mhm. And those experiences don't have to be big ones, right? Like it can be small things of I'm like I have these experiences all the time. It's like I don't know if I feel like shower or washing my hair. Oh, but it would be nice to have clean hair and I'm worth that. I'm going to choose to wash my hair today.
Yeah,
Or movement, I kind of use that one. Or even like food, like man, like I would feel so good eating this food and I'm worth that. I'm worth feeling satiated. I'm worth, having fuel for my body. I'm worth all of that. And so it doesn't have to, I mean, sometimes it can be really big experiences, but oftentimes for me it's those smaller experiences and choices where I just maybe choose things a little differently, having it with that frame of mind or that lens of no, I'm a very worthy person and I deserve to have good things in my life.
absolutely. And it's interesting with food because I've had food issues all of my life as well. I do things now to set myself up to feel better about how I feel about myself, which of
Mhm.
course is gonna benefit anybody around me. But when I eat things that I know are gonna cause me anxiety or are going to start that negative cycle, it's like, why would I do that to myself?
Mhm.
Versus when I put nutritious food in my body and I feel proud of myself and I feel good, right? So it's the mindset that you talked about it, but it's also how do I want to feel about myself? Same
Mhm.
with if I yell at my husband or kids or grandkids or whatever, how's that going to make me feel? Not only them, but how's it going to make me feel? I don't want to go through that. And I
Mhm.
certainly don't want to put them through that. So I'm going to
Yeah.
behave in a way that I can feel good about myself.
Yeah. And again, it all ties back to worth because there was a season in my life where I don't think I would have ever said it out loud, but deep down inside, I would have felt like, but yeah, I'm not worthy of feeling good. So I am going to yell or I am going to lash out because I don't deserve being treated kindly or I don't deserve good things in my life. And again, I probably would have never said that out loud in that time, but that is how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it for people to hear that because, again, I think so many people are going to say, yeah, that's me. It can
Mhm.
be different. It can be different.
Mhm.
All right. I appreciate so much you spending your time with me. You're
Thank
just a
you.
really delightful person. I mean, really. I mean, the fact that you are living your worth, it shows you glow. It should be glow with Shay.
There I like that. I think that needs to at least be a new hashtag. You can
Yeah,
be Shay, but then you can glow with Shay. I
you
like
do glow. I mean it. I noticed that the first time we met. I'm like, this woman glows.
oh, thank you. You know, I'll share something quickly before we get off just because I think it's a cool imagery associated with that. I have a friend who she's known me a long time and she's like, you know, before Shay, like you were kind of like a light bright. Like you were always shining, like you were always really bright, but it was more artificial, but still bright, like you made an impact. And she said, now, though, it's like I'm looking into a window where it's like some days are really bright and sunny, some days are more cloudy and gloomy and rainy, but it's so real and refreshing. And I
Mm,
said, that's like the perfect way to describe how my journey has been. I've always been worthy, I've always had a light within me, but now it's just like more honest and there's just a lot more peace behind it. So everybody can be a window. That's
right.
feels a lot easier than a light bright to me.
Yep. And even on the gloomy days, I mean, there's a joy that comes from knowing you're just being who you are.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's true.
All right, my friend. I look forward to when I get to talk to you next and when I finally get to give you a hug at some point.
Yes, I can't wait to give you a squeeze. I'm a big squeezer, so get ready.
Absolutely. And I will be glad to promote your retreat. I'm so excited about that. And
Thank you.
I will put everything in the show notes, but I'm
Okay.
going to be shouting it out on everywhere I go. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome. You're
Oh,
delightful. Thank you for being with me. You guys tell them how they can contact you.
yeah. So I'm on all the socials, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, podcast, all the platforms there. And you can find me on Grow with Shay everywhere. So
It's a
that's how you can
full-time
find
job.
me.
That is a full-time job, isn't it? That social media? Whew.
Oh, it is. But I have fun with it. So I'm usually posting some type of funny something here and there, and it's a joy, but it is a lot of work.
All right. Take care, grow and glow with Shay.
Thank you, Dr. Connie. So good to see you.
Bye-bye.